Hi, everybody. I'm Brittany Lewis, a breaking news reporter here at Forbes. Joining me now is Forbes senior contributor, Mark Joyella. Mark, I appreciate you coming on.
Thanks again for having me, Brittany.
It is a big day in the cable news industry. Chris Licht is out at CNN as CEO. This comes after a rocky year-long tenure really marred by low ratings on profits, bad PR, and a series of what many have described as programming missteps. So, what's your reaction to the news?
This felt like it was inevitable, especially after that profile in the Atlantic from Friday. Just a devastating portrayal in intimate detail of what Chris Licht was doing at CNN and how he was being perceived at CNN. And he really seems to have lost every last supporter inside the building. And on Wednesday morning, it all came to an end.
Let's talk about that Atlantic piece. It was 15,000 words. It has been described as embarrassing, devastating, blistering. And I mean, it really was. They laid out a scene by scene, year-long profile of Chris Licht, and many have described this as the impetus to his ouster. So for those who haven't read it, let's go over some highlights. First, it seemed as though Chris Licht was really fixated with reading negative coverage of himself, as well as being really obsessed with his predecessor, Jeff Zucker. He also seemed distant to talent and CNN staffers alike. I mean, he was giving Tim Alberta, the profiler, more access than what he was giving his own staffers, especially when he moved from the newsroom where Jeff Zucker was up to the 22nd floor, where many staffers said they couldn't even have access to him. He also made fun of the network's COVID coverage and the execution on big programming moves like the Trump town hall, as well as the CNN morning show, all proved to be a bust. So what's your reaction to the piece?
Yeah, other than those details, Brittany, the pictures were nice, so maybe that worked out. But the content was brutal, and you have to imagine how that landed inside CNN. There were, beliefs that he was distant. There were, descriptions of him as being aloof, a guy who doesn't chat, who doesn't sort of stop in the hallways and talk to you. And, that can be hard in a business like cable news, a lot of relationships, a lot of egos. And for somebody who comes in as chief executive and, as you said, moves the office from, Jeff Zucker famously had a very small office right off the newsroom and really spent a lot of his time in the control room, working alongside the journalists putting on the news each night. But he moves his office up to a corporate floor where, the joke inside CNN was, we're not sure if our badges could even get us up there if we were invited to come talk to him. So there was that sort of, he doesn't really want to hang out with us or get to know us. And then there's this scene in that Atlantic piece where he's at a dinner with other CNNers. And, that would be an opportunity to chat, to schmooze a little bit, to get to know people, to, really be casual and let them get to know you as a person. And instead, he is on his phone. And at one point, someone happens to see what he's looking at, and it's an article about him. That would be really weird behavior for anybody at a dinner party. But when you're the chief executive of a company, you've got other folks around the table and you don't even bother chatting with them. That comes across as super, super weird. And I think that article confirmed a lot of what people suspected about Chris Licht, and fairly or unfairly, they gave up on him. And, on Wednesday morning, the guy he reported to, David Zaslav, the chief executive of Warner Brothers Discovery, said, you know what, this isn't working. I take the blame for it, but it's over.
I found myself when I was reading it that it's one thing if other people, maybe anonymous sources, are describing you as self-absorbed, as paranoid, as fixated on your predecessor. But it's another thing in your own words to come across that way. And I think that's what really was the most embarrassing part of this piece. So the first question I had after going through the 15,000 word profile, it was a long read, was why, if you're CNN's PR, would you ever in a million years grant an outside reporter this level of access?
I have no idea. I just don't know. I got about a third of the way through that piece, and I kept thinking, when does CNN PR show up in this? When is there a PR person who steps in and says, hang on a second, let me interrupt, or, tries to stop it? Did anybody hear the quotes as those words came out of Chris Licht's mouth and think, I have to fix this, or at minimum, I have to cut this reporter off from access to the boss? I don't know what happened. I really don't. I think that the words I heard were that this was to be a story about the gut renovation of CNN. Essentially, Chris Licht comes in, the network's a mess, ratings are down. He tears it down to the studs and builds a modern, beautiful, functioning, highly rated network. And he's hailed as a hero. That didn't happen. Not only did that not happen, but he came across worse. And remember, this is a guy whose first day he comes in, cancels a streaming platform, CNN Plus, and lays off hundreds of people. So it's really hard to go downhill from that, but he did. And this article it's going to probably be discussed in business school as an example of having a tin ear as a leader, having no concept of how you are perceived. And yikes, wow.